Hey there, it's Vicki Howell here to show you how to connect the two pieces, so the long scarf portion or the traditional rainbow portion to the shorter chevron portion that is the trans and BIPOC flag, together to create the inclusivity scarf. So as I mentioned, these two pieces are worked sort of separately. You're first working the chevron part, and then you're going to start working just these welted rows. All of that is pretty straightforward. It's in the pattern, but what I did want to show you is how we are seaming as we go. So instead of creating the two pieces and then sewing them later, I'm actually using a method to connect the two as we knit them. So as the pattern calls for, you're going to cast on 11 stitches, a whole bunch of stitches for your long scarf. Of course, it's noted in the pattern, and then, work a row until you get to the last few stitches. Now, what I'm going to show you will work for both. You'll notice that there are different angles. So in the first half of the scarf, you'll be decreasing at the end and or beginning of every row, and for the second half, it's an increase. So, but the method that we're using to actually connect the two is the same regardless of what portion that you're on. All right, so I have these little pieces that I made just to make it a little bit easier to see. Or maybe not that much easier. Let me zoom in. Okay, so you'll notice this is a different color. When you're making the inclusivity scarf, it'll be the black portion that's the bottom, but that's a little bit difficult to see for the purposes of teaching. So I just created a blue one. And then also this is a different color than you would be working for your first stripe for the rainbow. You'd be working purple. I'm just using pink. It's what I had. Okay, so as the pattern calls for, that's a little bit too close. I have worked, until the end of my row. For this one, since this is the beginning, there's a decrease. So for this, it was SSK. Again, that's in the pattern. So here's where the magic happens. Okay, so you can see at the bottom, these are the stitches that we're going to be picking up. So we want half of our rainbow rows to be on this side and the other half on this side. All right, so in patterns you might have, I'm sure you've read before, pick up or pick up and knit. And we are going to just pick up, meaning we're not going to be drawing a loop up from the new color or other, strand of yarn into the loops of this. We just need the loop. So I've worked, this was a decrease, as I mentioned before, an SSK. We want to get to our last stitch. Then we want to slip it knitwise. And what that is the beginning of a SSK that you're going to do. So from here, you can either do this with your left or right needle. I'm going to do it with my left. You want to pick up a stitch and you're going to go under both loops of the stitch. You're going to treat that as the stitch. Okay, so what you're going to do once you get here is you're going to, with your right hand needle, pick up the two loops of the first stitch. The underside of a stitch. This is what it looks like. You can see it better right here. Okay, so these two loops are going to count as one stitch. So now what we've got is we've got our slip, and this counts as another slip, and now we need to knit them together. And now my piece is attached for when I flip the piece. I want to show that just one more time, just so I'm sure we have it. All right, so I'm at my last stitch. I think that's twisted. I'm at my last stitch. I'm going to slip it knitwise. Then I'm going to pick up a stitch under both loops of the stitch, the very first one, and you will just you will do this evenly along the way. So if you wanted to mark it ahead of time, dividing the 3 colors of stripes by the amount of space, putting stitch markers or whatever, you could do that. It's pretty self-explanatory when you're looking at the piece, but whatever makes you the most comfortable. Okay, so SSK, so a slip knit is slip 1, slip 2, knit both through the back loop, which is what we're doing to connect them. So it's really just a modified slip knit. I did not weave in my ends on this piece, and so it's coming out, so just ignore that. Okay, all right, so now we are connected. Like this. So from here, we're going to flip the piece over. And we want to pick up the next stitch. So the second stitch, I like to use my right hand needle and put it on the left hand needle. You could also just pick it up with your left hand needle, whatever works for you. You also have two choices here. So we're going to be knitting these two together so that we get our slant the way we want to, and also join them. You notice that my yarn is right here. It's actually like, you know, in the purl position. You could still knit with it that way, and it would be fine. But I actually kind of like the look of the wrapped stitch. So if you want to take your yarn, move it to the front, insert the needle in the next stitch, place that on my left hand needle. So now I've got the yarn, it's going to sort of wrap in front of that other stitch, kind of like a wrap and turn if you were doing short rows. And then we're knitting them together. And then you just continue working the rest of the row, just knitting it. And so slowly, you are going to be adding every row. You will attach it just by essentially doing a decrease with the loops from the underside of the BIPOC trans flag portion with the last stitch of the traditional pride stripe. So just do that all the way to the top. The only difference that will be on this side is that you're going to be increasing before you do the thing with the thing, but that doesn't change any steps regardless. So it's pretty simple, an easy way to not have to deal with sewing on later. If you did want to do that, however, if you prefer to seam, I would just ignore the last step of these rows. That's where you do the join. You could just knit the stitch instead and turn it, and then later you could seam it with a long strand. It won't be as stretchy. I don't love that option because this is a ribbing, and so it's a real stretchy piece. So joining as you go will help sort of like keep the integrity of the fabric. But if it feels too, you know, stressful, like ditch it, no worries. Okay, that's all there is to joining two pieces using a modified decrease stitch, either SSK or K2 together. If you have any questions, please just post them in the comment section, or you can always email us at support@yarnyay.com. Thanks.